Medicare Part D has some big changes coming in 2023 and over the next several years. But for now, let's dive into the 2023 Part D coverage phases. And if you take insulin, I have good news for you. Andy Stamus here with Medicare Mindset. Today's video will teach you how and why your drug prices change throughout the year in your Part D drug plan. Let's take a look. Here's a visual description of the 4 phases of Part D prescription drug coverage. It's a lot to look at, so let's take one phase at a time. Important note, whether you have a standalone Part D drug plan or a Medicare Advantage plan with Part D, they have to follow the same guidelines. Deductible phase. Every January 1st, the Part D deductible resets. Medicare has set the maximum Part D plan deductible in 2023 at $505. Remember, a deductible is what you owe before the insurance carrier helps. So if your plan has a deductible, you will owe the full cost of the applicable drugs until you meet the deductible. I say applicable drugs because not all drugs will necessarily be subject to the deductible. Some plans will have a $505 deductible on all drug tiers, while others only have a deductible on brand name tiers. And there are even some plans with no deductible. Next up is the initial coverage phase. Assuming your medications are covered on the plan's formulary list of drugs, this is when your Part D plan begins to pay the bulk of a drug's cost. It's tier-based pricing. Typically, generic drugs are Tier 1 or Tier 2, and then brand name drugs are Tier 3, 4, and 5. You will pay a copay or coinsurance percentage until you reach $4,660 of total gross drug costs. Gross costs are what the drugs actually cost, not just your portion. So if a drug's full retail cost is $500, but you only have a $30 copay, the full $500 is applied toward reaching the $4,660 amount, which gets you into the next phase of Part D, the coverage gap, also known as the donut hole. If you have a very expensive drug, then you can reach the donut hole very quickly. The donut hole phase of Part D has changed quite a bit since Part D began in 2006. In 2023, you owe 25% of the full cost of each of your medications in this phase. For some drugs, like generics, the cost might not change much. For others, like brand name and specialty drugs, the cost could go up substantially because you're now paying 25% of the full gross cost. It's like this until you reach $7,400 of true out-of-pocket costs, or TROOP. An important note about the $7,400 TROOP: this is not a cap on prescription drug costs. It's actually a misnomer. In 2023, you'll personally need to spend about $3,000 in copays to reach the TROOP. Why is that? Well, in the donut hole, you get credit for 70% of the cost of your brand name drugs, which is paid by the drug manufacturer behind the scenes. So that's what makes up the difference between your roughly $3,000 in copays and the $7,400 TROOP. Here's a quick summary of what gets you to the $7,400 TROOP. TROOP is calculated by adding up these 4 items: your cost in the deductible phase, your cost in the initial coverage phase, your costs in the coverage gap donut hole phase, and 70% of the brand name costs in the coverage gap donut hole, which, as I mentioned, is paid by the manufacturer. Catastrophic is the final phase. In 2023, when your true out-of-pocket costs reach $7,400, you're in the catastrophic phase. Remember, that's about $3,000 out of your pocket to get there. Then after that, for the remainder of the year, you will pay the higher of 5% of the drug's full cost, $4.15 for generics, or $10.35 for other drugs. This means your prescription costs in 2023 are potentially unlimited. You're always paying something in the catastrophic phase for the rest of the year. Keep in mind, you would only deal with the donut hole and catastrophic phases if you take pretty expensive medications. If your prescriptions are all Tier 1 and Tier 2 generics, then your Part D coverage will be pretty straightforward this year. If you experience all 4 phases of Part D in 2023, you will potentially pay 4 different prices for your medications throughout the year. But hang in there. With the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, You will no longer pay a copay in the catastrophic phase beginning in 2024. And even better, there will be a $2,000 cap in prescription costs beginning in 2025. Alright, so how does this work if you take insulin? The Inflation Reduction Act also impacted insulin pricing beginning in 2023. Here's what you need to know. It's pretty easy to remember. If your insulin is on the plan's formulary list of medications, a 30-day supply will be no more than a $35 copay in all phases of Part D. So you'll have smooth pricing for your insulin all year long as you reach the different phases. As you can see, Part D is confusing, but continues to improve. Check out our video here to learn more about how the Inflation Reduction Act will transform Medicare Part D.